What happens when the man who signs the checks shows up in a dust-covered hoodie, and no one has a clue he owns the place? Ethan Dorsey leaned back in his truck seat, watching the chaotic flow of workers and forklifts through the open gate of Site 9. It was the last of his company's 9 renovation sites. He'd bought the whole chain 7 years ago from a retiring contractor who was tired of fighting city permits. Since then, Ethan had built it into a well-oiled, high-reputation renovation and design company. But lately, something wasn't sitting right. Site 9 was always behind schedule. It was supposed to be a simple office to retail conversion, but the work dragged for weeks. The district manager, Craig, kept blaming material delays and shorthands. Yet the other 8 sites were humming just fine under the same conditions. Ethan didn't want another filtered report. He wanted the truth. So he shaved his beard down to stubble, threw on steel-toed boots, and padded his frame with an old hoodie and work gloves. He hadn't met the foreman of Site 9 yet. Tommy, Craig had said his name was. Ethan made sure to go through a temp agency that supplied general laborers. Nobody would connect him to the guy who ran corporate out of a glass-walled office uptown. He stepped out of the truck, dust already clinging to his pants. A man with a clipboard and a sour expression glanced up. "You the new temp?" the man asked. "Yeah. Evan," Ethan said, using the alias he'd given. The man didn't smile. "Tommy, we're behind, so don't expect a warm welcome. You know how to use a paint sprayer?" "Somewhat." "Good. You'll be running lines inside. Don't slow down." Ethan followed Tommy through the site. The building smelled of plaster and sweat. The air was thick with dust. He noticed something strange within the first hour. Guys were working nonstop. No one stopped for water. No one sat. Even during a break in tasks, they kept moving, cleaning, stacking, prepping. He kept an eye on the clock. By noon, after 5 straight hours, no one had stopped to eat. "Hey!" Ethan leaned toward a guy mixing grout. "When's break?" The worker, a tall black man with tired eyes and a deep voice, gave a low chuckle without looking up. "Break? You're funny. I mean lunch?" He wiped sweat from his brow with his sleeve. "We don't really get one. Tommy says if we want the job, we keep our heads down. You take 10, you're gone." Ethan stared at him. "That legal?" The man gave him a look that said, "Does it matter?" Later that afternoon, Ethan saw Tommy walk past a guy sitting on a stack of drywall, clearly exhausted. Tommy kicked the board the man was sitting on. "Get up. You got time to sit, you got time to sand." The guy stood up quickly, no argument. Ethan's jaw tightened. He asked another worker, a quiet woman named Haley who was sanding trim, "Does he always treat people like that?" Haley didn't look up. "Worse when Craig visits. They call it tightening the leash." Ethan nodded slowly. He felt his stomach twist. This wasn't just poor management. It was intimidation. At the end of the shift, he was sore, sweaty, and angry. He sat on the tailgate of a truck next to the tall man he'd spoken to earlier. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. "Deshawn." "You've been here long?" "For months. I got 3 kids, so I don't complain. But it's rough, man. I seen guys cry in the porta-john. No breaks, no respect. Tommy talks to us like we're trash." Ethan looked away, jaw clenched. "Why stay?" Deshawn shrugged. "Because the work shows up. And it pays. Barely, but it pays." That night, Ethan sat in a cheap motel room a few blocks away. He stared at the wall, furious with himself. How had he missed this? He'd built the company on the idea that laborers were the backbone. Yet here was a man kicking workers off drywall for sitting, calling it efficiency. He thought about Deshawn, Haley, the others. He hadn't seen one person eat all day. Ethan knew what he had to do, but he needed one more day, one more look. He wanted to see how far Tommy would push it, and whether Craig knew. He pulled out a notebook and started writing. Names, details, Tomorrow he'd push harder. Maybe even challenge Tommy. If he got fired, so be it. They had no idea who he really was. Not yet. Ethan arrived just after sunrise the next morning, the air still cool and quiet. He parked across the street and watched the first few workers trickle in. No one spoke much. They moved like they were already bracing for something. He waited until the crew gathered near the back entrance, then walked up and blended in. Tommy's voice cut through the dull murmur. "Let's make one thing clear," he said, pacing in front of the group. "Craig's coming at noon. If anyone's off task when he shows up, don't expect a call back tomorrow. I don't care if you're bleeding. You stay busy." "Got it." No one answered. Tommy pointed at a short, wiry man standing near the pallets. "Luis, you're on exterior pressure wash. Haley, finish the front trim. You," his finger landed on Ethan, "drywall patching inside. Room 4. Ethan nodded and headed in with the others. He passed Deshawn on the way in. The man gave a small nod but didn't say anything. Ethan could tell he was already worn out, his shoulders were slumped, and there was a slight limp in his walk that hadn't been there the day before. Inside room 4, Ethan found half-finished wall panels and a bucket of compound sitting in the corner. Tools were scattered on the floor. No ventilation. One narrow window latched shut. He pulled on a mask from his pocket and got to work. An hour in, he heard raised voices down the hall. He paused, listening. "I told you to stay outside," Tommy barked. "I needed a blade for the hose fitting," Luis replied, his voice calm. "I don't care. You're dragging mud through the hall. You think I'm running a daycare here?" Ethan stepped into the hallway just in time to see Tommy flick a hand toward the door. "Outside. Now. Next time, that's your last hour." Luis didn't argue. He just turned and walked back out, his steps heavy. By mid-morning, the site was buzzing but tense. Ethan continued patching drywall, but his mind was elsewhere. He noticed something else. The material deliveries were inconsistent. A couple of workers stood idle in the back hallway, waiting for supplies they'd requested yesterday. No one seemed to know when they'd arrive. It was hard to miss the frustration in their eyes. He caught Haley in the stairwell during a moment between tasks. "Do deliveries always run this late?" She shook her head. "Not usually, but Craig runs all the orders through him now. Says it keeps things efficient." "He's the district guy, right?" "Yeah. We used to get what we needed on time. Now we have to wait for him to sign off even on basics. Half the time he forgets." Ethan frowned. "So you just stand around?" "We find something else until Tommy loses it. Then we get yelled at for stalling." She turned and walked off before he could say more. At noon sharp, a dark blue sedan pulled up. Craig stepped out wearing polished boots and a fitted jacket with the company's logo stitched in gold. He looked around, adjusting his sunglasses as he walked toward the entrance. Tommy was already waiting. His posture changed, more upright, less aggressive. Ethan stayed inside, watching from the second-floor landing. Craig's voice carried. "Progress looks slow." "We've had some hiccups," Tommy replied. "Temp crew's not as sharp as I'd like." Craig waved a hand dismissively and walked past him. "I'll take a look myself." He made his way through the site quickly, glancing at workstations, pointing out misaligned trim, commenting on dust buildup in corners, things that had nothing to do with actual progress. Workers tensed as he passed, like they were holding their breath. Ethan followed at a distance. When Craig reached the break area, a small, makeshift space with a crate and a cooler, he frowned. "What's this?" "Just a spot to eat real quick," Deshawn said from nearby, wiping his hands on his pants. Craig turned to Tommy. "I thought we agreed no extended breaks. You said you were keeping it tight." "Yeah," Tommy said quickly. "Deshawn just needed water. I already told him." Craig nodded slowly. "Make sure it doesn't become a habit." Deshawn didn't say a word. He picked up his rag and went back to work. Ethan's jaw clenched. He couldn't let that go. He stepped forward. "Excuse me." Craig turned, looking him up and down. "Who are you?" "Evan. Temp labor." Craig gave a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Something you needed?" "Yeah. Just wondering if denying people 10 minutes to drink water is official policy now." Craig raised an eyebrow. "We don't tolerate slacking." "It's not slacking. It's hydration. OSHA standard." Craig's smile faded. "Watch your tone. You're a temp." Tommy stepped in. "I'll handle this, sir." "No," Ethan said, standing his ground. "I've been here 2 days. I've seen how this place runs. Guys are afraid to stand still for 60 seconds. They're scared to eat. And you," he looked at Craig, "you act like that's normal." Craig stepped closer. "You think you know how to run a site? You signed up to paint walls, not to preach." Ethan pulled a folded sheet from his pocket. It was creased from his back pocket, but the letterhead was unmistakable. Dorsey Group Construction. Signed by Ethan Dorsey himself. He didn't hand it over. He just held it up. Craig stared at it, then back at him. Yeah, Ethan said calmly. "I'm Ethan Dorsey, and I've seen enough." The silence was immediate. Tommy's face went pale. Craig stepped back, his mouth slightly open. "I've watched workers get threatened for taking a breath. I've seen basic supplies delayed because you forgot. And I just heard you call hydration slacking." Neither man spoke. "You're both done," Ethan said. "Effective now. Get your things and leave the property." Craig opened his mouth, but Ethan cut him off. "If you say one word about misunderstanding or context, I'll walk you out myself." Tommy didn't argue. He turned and walked toward the trailer behind the site. Craig hesitated, then followed. Ethan turned to the crew, who were now gathering nearby, watching silently. "Everyone take 15. Water, food, whatever you need. And if anyone tells you otherwise, send them to me." Deshawn looked around like he wasn't sure it was real. Haley leaned against the railing, visibly exhaling. Ethan stepped aside and pulled his phone. He called his operations manager. "Lena, I need a new foreman and district lead sent to Site 9. Today. And start scheduling one-on-ones with every crew member here. I want to hear what they've been through directly." He hung up and looked back at the crew. No one had left. They were still standing there, unsure. "Go on," he said, softer now. "You've earned it." One by one, they started to move. A few sat down. Others grabbed water. No one smiled. Not yet. But the tension that had blanketed the site for who knew how long had started to lift. Ethan walked to the edge of the lot and looked up at the unfinished facade. There was still a lot of work to do. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like it might actually get done right. Ethan stood just outside the site trailer, phone pressed to his ear as the afternoon sun crept toward the horizon. The air had changed, not lighter, exactly, but quieter. The sharp edge of fear that had tinted every movement on site was finally dulling. He watched Deshawn rinse his hands at the portable wash station, then sit on a stack of plywood with a sandwich pulled from his lunch pail. It was the first time Ethan had seen anyone eat. "Yeah, that's right," he said into the phone. "Both of them. I don't want them within 100 feet of any site we operate. Full separation, immediate. And get HR started on exit paperwork. I'll send you a full report tonight." He ended the call and stepped back inside the trailer. Lena had already dispatched a safety officer and a compliance rep to arrive the next morning. In the meantime, he needed someone to keep the crew moving without pushing them past the edge. A temporary lead, someone from the crew who already had their respect. He found Haley near the back stairwell, her eye on a misaligned baseboard she was smoothing by hand. She didn't notice him approach until he crouched beside her. "Mind if I ask you something?" he said. She straightened, flexing her wrist. Sure. You ever run a crew before? Not officially, she said, brushing dust from her knee. I've led small groups. At the last company, I was the go-to when the foreman went off-site. But they didn't promote me. Said I was too quiet. Ethan tilted his head. Quiet doesn't mean incapable. She looked at him steadily. No, but it makes people overlook you. He nodded. Think you could step in for a few days? Just until I get someone permanent out here. Help keep things moving without burning everyone out. Haley hesitated for only a moment. If it means I can make sure they're treated right, I'll do it. Good. You'll have full authority to delegate, and you report directly to me. If anyone tries to undercut that, you let me know. She gave a single nod and turned back toward the floor plan taped to the wall. We'll need to reshuffle some tasks, though. Half the crew doesn't know where to go now that Tommy's out. Do it. Prioritize finishing the upstairs drywall. I'll help with materials. Haley didn't waste time. She moved through the site with unhurried focus, redirecting workers with short, clear instructions. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. People listened. Ethan hauled a fresh stack of panels inside, catching snippets of conversation as he passed. One of the younger guys, barely out of his teens, was asking Deshawn for advice on taping corners. Deshawn, now moving with less stiffness, offered a few pointers without condescension. For the first time since Ethan arrived, there was a rhythm to the work that didn't feel like desperation. But not everything was smoothing out. Near the back corridor, he found two workers standing by a half-installed electrical panel. One of them, stocky, mid-40s, with a shaved head, was leaning against the wall, arms crossed. What's the holdup? Ethan asked. The second man, a wiry guy with a tool belt slung low, answered first. Waiting on the conduit. Craig had it rerouted last week, but the new piping never came. The one leaning didn't respond, just stared at Ethan. Is that about right? Ethan asked him directly. You the new boss? I own the company. The man scoffed. Didn't realize we were getting babysat. Ethan kept his expression neutral. I'm here because things weren't running right. That includes this job and how people were being treated. I get the job done, the man said. I don't need someone watching my every move. What's your name? Brent. Well, Brent, if you've got an issue with management, you can speak to me like a professional. But if you're going to stand around and sneer while others work, you're wasting my payroll. Brent pushed off the wall. I've been doing this 20 years. I don't answer to suits. Ethan stepped forward, voice low. You answer to respect. If you can't show it to the people around you, you don't belong on my crew. Is that a threat? No. That's your final notice. Next word out of line, you're done. Brent held his stare for a beat too long, then turned and walked off without another word. Ethan didn't follow. He turned to the other worker. You good to manage this once the piping shows up? Yeah, I've got it. Let me know if Brent causes problems. He moved on, checking in with Haley again. She'd already marked up the site map with revised assignments and was coordinating a new materials list. Anyone giving you trouble? He asked. She hesitated, then said, One guy, older, keeps brushing off what I say. Acts like I'm invisible. Brent. She nodded. Ethan didn't hesitate. He found Brent near the tool station, unspooling a wire reel. You're done here, Ethan said flatly. Brent turned. What? You heard me. Pack your gear. You're off the job. You can't be serious. You ignored a direct warning, disrespected a lead, and you're dragging morale. This isn't the kind of company where that flies. Brent shook his head, muttering something under his breath, but didn't argue further. He grabbed his tools and walked out without looking back. Ethan returned to the central room, where Haley was updating Deshawn on the new rotation. There was no celebration, no applause, but the tension had thinned further. People were beginning to feel like they could actually do their jobs without constantly watching their backs. Late in the afternoon, a young woman knocked on the trailer door. She wore a high-vis vest and carried a clipboard. "I'm with the temp agency," she said. "They told me to drop off timesheets for Site 9. Ethan motioned her in. "You've been here before?" "Twice. I handle admin stuff." He leaned against the desk. "Did you ever get complaints about this site?" She flipped through the forms. "All the time, but no one wanted to put their name on anything. Said the foreman would blacklist them from other jobs." Ethan's expression didn't change, but his voice hardened. "Did they say what kind of complaints?" She nodded. "Mostly about breaks being denied. Verbal abuse. One guy said he got fired for limping after he twisted his ankle. Did anyone report that to your supervisors?" She looked down. "They said if there was no written statement, there's nothing they could do." Ethan took a breath. "That policy changes today. If anyone sends in a report from Site 9, I want it flagged and sent directly to me, no filters." "Got it." She nodded. He walked her out, then circled back inside. The sun was dipping below the frame of the building, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. A few workers were sweeping up, others coiling cords or stacking and used materials for the next shift. He found Deshawn near the back fence, locking up the storage bins. "You sticking around?" Ethan asked. Deshawn looked over. "If the rest of the week's like today, yeah, I am." Ethan nodded. "You ever think about taking on more? Supervisory stuff?" "Maybe. I like working with my hands, though. I'm not asking you to sit behind a desk. Just keep people supported. Keep the work moving and the crew safe." Deshawn rubbed the back of his neck. "Could be open to it. Let's talk more tomorrow." As the crew filtered out for the day, Ethan stood near the gate watching them go. No one was rushing. No one looked over their shoulder like they expected to be yelled at. It wasn't fixed. Not yet. But the cracks had air now. And for the first time, those inside had a voice. 2 days after removing Craig and Tommy, Ethan returned to Site 9 before dawn, this time in his own clothes. No hoodie, no alias, just jeans, boots, and the same navy blue windbreaker with the Dorsey Group logo stitched across the chest that he hadn't worn on a job site in years. He moved through the lot alone, not trying to sneak around this time, but still watching closely. There were fewer people on site than the week before. That was expected. Some temps hadn't returned, and a few full-timers had transferred out. But the ones still here moved with more purpose. There was no shouting, no frantic scurrying, just quiet coordination. The pace was still cautious, but it was steadier. Inside the trailer, Haley was reviewing the updated floor plans with a new site foreman, a seasoned guy named Rudy who'd arrived from site for the night before. He'd brought his own clipboard, his own expectations, and a reputation for running clean, fair builds. Ethan had chosen him personally. "Morning," Ethan said as he stepped in. Rudy nodded but didn't stand up. "We're starting with the mezzanine finish. Haley's got a plan for the split crew rotation. Looks solid." Ethan looked over the layout. "We still short on electrical?" "For the moment. I've got 2 apprentices coming by Thursday. Until then, we bump that to evenings." Haley tapped the sheet. "I've already reassigned Brent's wiring section to Luis. He's slower, but he's careful." Ethan folded his arms. "That's fine. I'd rather slow and accurate than fast and redone." Rudy nodded. "You'll get that with this group." Haley closed the folder and looked at Ethan. "You staying on site today?" "Not all day. Just long enough to check in with a few people." He walked the site in silence, stopping only to observe. Luis, now on electrical, worked with his head down and steady hands. He didn't notice Ethan watching, but his posture was more upright than before. Deshawn stood near the west wall, helping a younger guy line up a drywall panel. He pointed, then stepped back to let the kid screw it in himself. It was a quiet handoff, no instructions shouted, no gestures exaggerated. Just trust. Ethan waited until the panel was up, then walked over. "How's it going?" he asked. Deshawn wiped his palms on his pants. "Better. Still behind schedule, but nobody's burning out." "You feel like the rotation's working?" "It is. Gives everyone a breather without stopping the job." "Rudy's sharp. Doesn't waste time barking either." Ethan looked over at the apprentice, who was now taping the seams. "He learning okay?" Deshawn grinned faintly. "He's learning not to rush. That's a start." Ethan stepped back inside and called Lena. "We're stabilizing," he told her. "Rudy's got the rotation under control." "That's good news," she replied. "You want me to start backfilling the supervisor role permanently?" "Not yet. I want to see how Haley handles the next week or two. She's been holding it together better than anyone expected." He hung up and went to find her. She was near the front entrance, checking a shipment that had just arrived: PVC piping, trim boards, and bundles of insulation. She was cross-referencing the packing list against the original order. "You think it's all here?" he asked. She nodded. "First time in weeks we've gotten a full order on time." "Good. I need to talk to you." She stepped aside. "Something wrong?" "No. I want to offer you the assistant foreman role. Officially. You'll report to Rudy, but you'll have authority to coordinate scheduling, material checks, and task assignments. It's a real leadership track, not just a title." She crossed her arms. "Why me?" "Because you stepped up when it wasn't safe to. You kept people moving when things were falling apart. And not once did you put yourself ahead of the work." Haley looked away for a second, then back. "I'll do it. But I'm not changing how I talk to people." "You better not," Ethan said. "That's why I'm asking." He left her to finish the delivery check and headed to the back lot, where a few of the day laborers were gathering for cleanup rotation. One of them, a man in his 50s with weathered hands and a crooked knee brace, walked up to him. "You the guy who fired the last foreman?" "I am." The man adjusted his cap. "Appreciate it. I was about to quit. Felt like I was back in the 90s working scared." Ethan nodded. "You shouldn't have to." He turned to leave but paused. "What's your name?" "Reggie. If you're ever looking for steady work, not just daily, talk to Rudy." Reggie nodded once and returned to the others. Later that afternoon, Ethan called a meeting inside the main floor, where the drywalling had finally caught up to the framing. The crew stood in a loose circle, about 20 of them. Some leaning on tools, others arms crossed, listening. "I don't usually make speeches," Ethan said, "but I owe you one." He waited a beat. No phones out, no eyes wandering. Just quiet attention. "I built this company to create jobs that don't leave people broken. Somewhere along the way, I stopped checking how that was actually playing out. That's on me. I should have caught it sooner." He looked around the group. "You were overworked, ignored, and in some cases threatened. And you kept showing up anyway. That says a lot about you. But it also says how much we failed you. That ends now." A few heads nodded. Others just watched. "I'm not promising miracles. You'll still work hard. But you won't be punished for breathing. You won't be punished for eating. And you will be heard." He gestured toward Rudy and Haley. "These two are your chain of command now. They've got full authority to manage without fear, and they answer directly to me. So if something's wrong, speak up. There will be no middlemen filtering complaints." He stepped back. "That's it. Thanks for sticking through it." No applause followed. Just a quiet murmur as people returned to their tasks. That was fine. Ethan hadn't done it for praise. He'd done it because it was overdue. As the sun began to set, Ethan walked the perimeter one last time before leaving. He passed Deshawn reviewing a tool inventory sheet with another worker. Haley was near the front gate, quietly explaining the next day's schedule to two of the newer crew members. Rudy was on the phone, likely coordinating the night shift rotation. There was no drama, no tension, just work. He paused at the edge of the lot, looking back at the building. The facade still needed siding. The roofline was uneven near the northeast corner. But the inside was finally catching up to the blueprint. And more importantly, the people building it were no longer doing it in fear. He climbed into his truck, knowing he wouldn't need to come back undercover again. Not because the work was done, but because the right people were doing it now, for the right reasons.